The year 2000, 2 years after Kirby's Dream Land 3 came out, and at this point nearing the end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle. They released Kirby 64. At this point, it's almost tradition to release a Kirby game right at the end of a console's life cycle. And a lot of this can be attributed to HAL's meticulous attention to detail. They want to polish that game and make it as good as they can before they release it. Kirby 64 is just a fun game, and probably one of my favorite Kirby games. So I genuinely wanted to play through the entire game again. So I skimmed over the old videos trying to find an excuse to do it again, and unfortunately, they hold up quite well. So we're going to be doing something a little bit differently today. We're just going to take a look at the entirety of Kirby 64 today. Kirby 64 is the last in the Dark Matter trilogy, which started back in Kirby's Dream Land 2, and shares so many similarities with Kirby's Dream Land 3 that I've found myself referring to it as Kirby's Dream Land 4. Of all the similarities, not the least of which is the aesthetic. Though not necessarily framed as such, the game has a wonderful child's storybook aesthetic, and wouldn't really feel out of place if it were a pop-up book. Carrying that feeling over, when you first boot up the game, you're greeted with a lovely little cinematic that introduces you to Ripple Star, immediately Dark Matter, and a large crystal of unknown importance. And when the cutscene ends, you're dropped on the title screen where everyone stands there awkwardly staring off into the distance with no expression on their face and no background music. I'm not sure if their intention was to make this as uncomfortable as possible, but they've done a good job. And once you start a new game proper, you're greeted with the second half of the opening cinematic, where Ribbon, our small fairy friend, first encounters Kirby, who Kirby, being the upstanding person he is, promises to help her along. The first level, I feel, serves a good introduction. It's fairly basic and not terribly dangerous, but gives you a good introduction to the game and the mechanics you're going to be dealing with. Specifically, the way abilities work in this game. You'll notice a lot more enemies give abilities in this than in Kirby's Dream Land 3. Almost every enemy gives something. I was even surprised several times by enemies that gave abilities. The sheer number of abilities is actually quite small. Only 7, I believe. But in HAL's attempts to always do something new and interesting with the abilities, you can actually combine 2 abilities, for a total of 49 different abilities. You can do this by sucking up 2 enemies at once, or once you have a single ability, you can take it back out of your mouth and throw it at an enemy. You can throw it forward, up, or just walk into an enemy with an ability in order to combine them. You get the impression they tried to make it as easy as possible on you to combine abilities, so you were never feeling like you got cheated out of a combination because you didn't do something right. With all the different enemies scattered about, the first level is actually a pretty good place to experiment with this. As has become standard in Kirby games at this point, there are also collectibles spread throughout all of the levels, and in order to get the best ending, you have to collect all of them. There are 3 per level and 1 per boss, though the 1 in the boss levels you get automatically, so that kind of doesn't count. Most of these are relatively easy to find or see. The first one in the first level is just right here in front of you, which lets you know that these things are here, they're there to collect, and lets them be a little bit more devious later on with knowing that you know that. Just after the star is the game's first mini-boss. You'll find Kirby 64 is generally an easier game than Dream Land 2 or 3. And I feel like a great deal of that is simply because of a refining of the controls and mechanics of the game, but also they just do less to outright challenge you. The mini-bosses, for example, are just all large normal enemies. They do exactly what the normal enemy would do, if anything at all, and are almost never a threat in the least. Combining fire and cutter gives you this fancy fire sword, a pretty decent ability all around that I make quick work of the mini-boss with. Just outside the mini-boss, you'll find Bomb, which is a little more difficult to use on its own than usual, mostly because you have to hold down the button for quite a while before you do anything other than drop the bomb at your feet. But you do need Bomb to break this black object in the center of the river, so you can collect the next crystal. You'll find a lot of objects color-coded like that throughout the game, so you know what ability you need to use on it to break it. The first world also introduces us to our friends that will be accompanying us throughout the rest of this adventure, and the first one we find is Waddle Dee. Though Dark Matter seems to find Waddle Dee before us, turning him into a Waddle Doo. Is that how that works? He does almost nothing in combat and is quickly taken care of. This gets us a friend, a crystal shard, and introduces us to the game's post-level minigame. A timing game similar to the one in Dreamland 3, but with more fluid motions, it's easier to tell what exactly you're doing. Here you can get 1-ups, stars, of which I believe 30 gives you a 1-up, healing items, and an important collectible item, for completionists anyway, trading cards. As far as I can tell, you are guaranteed to get a new card unlocked if you grab the card in this minigame. If you collect all of them, you'll just stop seeing these appear. And I'm going to be collecting as many as I can through this playthrough. Takes us back to the level select with a real charming little paper crayon drawing on them. I like how they're even kind of faded out, so it looks like it wasn't colored in all the way. And then it zooms out to show the team looking at this like they were just planning what they were going to do next. Like they're at a war table moving troops around. The second level's got some real sleepy music, which I suppose reflects on how relaxed early game is. It's also nice because you have access to every ability in the game right here in the first room. Actually, there's 1 or 2 you have to go to the second room for. I mentioned in Dreamland 3 that I felt like a lot of the abilities in the game were just gimmick abilities that weren't really useful, and it was harder to find one that was actually useful and will get you through a level. 64 is kind of the inverse of that, where you can combine almost anything and get something useful out of it. Rock and Cutter combined, for example, will turn you into one of your animal friends. Your animal friends were actually planned to be in Kirby 64 originally, but somewhere along the line got dropped. They do still carry on here with this ability, though. Which friend you turn into is random, and some of them are more useful than others, but if you can turn into Pitch, you're kind of just immortal and can move wherever you want to. Waddle Dee carries us to our second crystal shard. Just keep an eye out for the stars leading off the bottom of the screen. And with Double Electric, we can just vibe our way through the mini-boss and grab that crystal shard too. A repeat of Waddle Dee, but with a prior boss this time. Adeline is a much more challenging fight than Waddle Dee was, but is still no match for the vibes. That mass of pixels makes me feel like the game's trying to censor some horrible thing, but I have no idea what it's supposed to be. Even the wiki just calls it a mass of jumbled pixels. And then, just like Waddle Dee, Adeline joins the group. Stage 3 takes us to DDD's castle. Wow, gonna be a short game. And in this first run up to the castle, you're gonna want to grab Double Cutter. I mentioned before the general quality of life things that Kirby 64 added that made it just generally more pleasant to control than Dreamland 3. And an example of that is Cutter. You don't have to worry about catching Cutter or making sure it comes back to you or that it doesn't orbit you. It just comes back. A small detail that I like is when Cutter is passing through a solid object, you kind of see chunks of it flying off. And you need Double Cutter, right after you move to the other side of the wall, for this green block at the bottom. I believe any combination of Cutter will break this, but Double Cutter is relatively easy to get. Single Cutter won't work because it doesn't go low enough to hit the floor. And as soon as we're done, I drop Double Cutter, because moving around with Cutter in this game is kind of difficult. It's really good to combine with pretty much anything, but on its own, Cutter is awkward, because while the Cutter is out, you can't duck or run or anything. I love this bit of Kirby looking back at the screen like, you guys seeing this crap? The fight against DDD is nice because it's actually a remix of the fight against DDD in Dreamland 3. Complete with flying up in the air, eyeball on the stomach, and everything. Still a relatively easy fight, though, as this isn't a final boss anymore. Honestly, not even a regular boss. And I believe this game was the start of DDD outright helping Kirby. The first world only has 4 stages, with the boss being Wispy Woods, as is tradition. We actually see one of the game's uses of 3D, which is this circular arena. As is also tradition, Wispy is a very easy fight. Especially once he gets to his second phase, he never actually turns all the way to line up with you, meaning the route that he spits out will not hit you as long as you don't walk into it. Most of this fight can be done standing still. With our job on Popstar done, Ribbon's Crystal Shard opens us up a path to the next world. Rockstar! The game has 6 worlds and only 4 or 5 stages per world, which I think lets them be a little more creative with the themes on each world. It never really feels like they're running out of ideas or just trying to hit a word limit. Some exciting music starts us off in level 1. Kirby 64 doesn't actually have the energy drink in it as a food item. I suppose with the ability to use 3D graphics, they just wanted to make a wide variety of foods, all of which heal you for just 1 unit. Another quality of life improvement is rock, as once you transform, you can roll and even walk. Granted, it's very slow, but it lets you actually move around in a way that you couldn't before, which makes it feel a lot more viable, and if you get stuck with it, not an unfortunate event. Your first Crystal Shard is actually right above the Thwomps, and the second one you get from the mini-boss, which I was a little bit worried since rock would just roll down the hill, but it didn't end up being a problem. Following that, you'll be in a room where the sand is rising, which gives a sense of urgency, but you're not in a lot of danger. You don't actually die if you touch the sand. There's just a risk of getting crushed. Now, I carried rock in from earlier because you actually need it, so you can combine it with electricity, which is just outside here, to go back for the 3rd Crystal Shard. Rock Electricity is a shockingly good ability that I've even used as a boss killer before. It's fairly easy to control since it goes straight out in front of you to start. The electricity beam also hurts things, and whenever you want, you can break it and re-spit it out. Instead of being an all-rock desert world, the second stage actually takes you to a grassy field with some ruins, which I think overall is a real neat theme and actually fits with the world well enough. The next shard is relatively easy to get to. As long as you're looking around for it, you can find it, and then it's just a matter of working your way down to it. The next one is in plain sight. You just have to remember that Kirby cannot fly forever in this game. You've still got plenty of breath to get it, but just get down and get back out. Don't be too scared of the crushers in the following room. They only start rising when you actually touch the bottom. Though some bad judgments on my part nearly got me squished anyway. I remember the top of this wall as being kind of special for being one of the first places you can accidentally come upon fire electric, which is just hilarious. It's time for DDD to help us out. Being a big strong guy, he can break all these walls for us. He is larger and less mobile, but it's nice to change things up a bit. I believe originally both Waddle Dee and Adeline were also intended to be playable, just like DDD is. But that's something else that didn't quite make the cut. The next shard is also in this room. You'll probably see it while you're going through, so you just have to backtrack and go around to get it. I really dig that this next cave sand level has almost no brown in it. It's got a really unique look and could have very easily been boring as heck. Now, for the very first Crystal Shard, you are actually going to need rock, which is not in this first room. So you're going to have to bring that back from another level. When you pause the game, you're given the option to try again, which makes me think that it's just going to start the level over again and maybe dock you a life, but no, it just exits you to the map. What's nice about this is it also keeps anything that you've collected along the way, so you can grab a shard or an ability or anything, exit, and keep it. So anyway, now that we have rock, let's go back and grab that shard. Fire rock isn't as useful an ability, since in order to attack in front of you, you have to aim it sideways, but it's still not bad. You're given a pretty obvious choice in this room. Make sure to take the left path. You'll have to fight through a mini-boss, but this is the only way to get the Crystal Shard. Those fish give Cutter, by the way. I gave Ice Cutter a try, but it just wasn't working out for me. I think you only hurt things when you jump in the air and spin. I don't know if I've given enough appreciation for the music in this game. I feel like every track works well in one way or another. Once you make it underwater, you'll be given a proper introduction to your swimming mechanics, which are pretty good, all things considered. You can swim in any direction, hitting jump makes you move up specifically, and you can even suck in underwater in case you either want an ability or drop your ability. Though you've got to take a lot of damage to drop your ability in this game. So that's not something you have to worry too much about. You'll also find these bones falling in here, and don't worry too much about them. They don't actually hurt to touch. They just shove you around. Oh boy, guess what we're going back to? Oh hey, it's Kiki. The pyramid's back! And turns out there's a whole other upside-down pyramid under that pyramid. This friggin' pig always gets me on the way in, because he comes from behind when he wasn't behind you a minute ago. The cannons in Kirby actually do know how to lead their shots, and not all cannons do, but I'm willing to bet because you're going up, they are leading their shots here, just to make sure they still hit you. First crystal's not bad, just be careful not to get crushed. And these little diamond guys give electricity, which we're going to want for later. He's right in the next room. You're going to need bomb and electric to look at the paintings that Adeline made so you can solve the puzzle and get another shard. Last shard from the mini-boss, and we can get out of here. Conceptually, I think this boss is probably one of the neater bosses, but in practice, I just don't like this boss a lot. Got this first phase where you can't hurt it, you just kind of have to dodge for a minute. There's probably a safe spot I don't know about. Unfortunately, this boss is highly resistant to the vibes, and can probably be a challenge for new players. If only because you're used to coming in with an ability to just trounce everything, and I don't know of many abilities that are good against this boss. However, Powerless Kirby is actually pretty good against this guy. It's relatively easy to hit him, and there's just so much ammo around. In fact, all that ammo around is probably what contributes to this being hard with an ability, since it's just in the way. You don't get the little cute world intro cinematics that you got in Dreamland 2. You get what's closer to a world end cinematic, but it's still real cute seeing all these characters interact. And we're off to a whole world dedicated to water levels. I like how the game encourages you to experiment. Because if you just grab one ability, then you're like, I can just chuck this star at something else and maybe even have a better ability. And if you find out, I don't know, I've used this already, I could maybe go with something else. You could chuck that out and there's an enemy right around the corner with something else. And I think that's due to how easy it is to change abilities, but also how good most abilities are. And that the game just puts enemies everywhere with abilities. The first shard is in this room where the cannons keep shooting Kirby into the walls. You may even see it in passing, you just gotta fly up a little bit from one. I haven't seen a lot of ice enemies, so we haven't had a chance to combine a lot of those yet. Snow Cutter is actually pretty alright as long as you've got kind of a straightaway. Now unfortunately we needed bomb, so I had to go back to respawn the guy. Enemies do respawn, but it seems like it's only enemies with abilities. And you don't have to go too far either. I believe I'm actually looking for Bomb Cutter, and I was really hoping that the spear guy gave Cutter. Thankfully, the game even lets you backtrack into previous rooms, if you want to go back and get an ability or something. Bomb Cutter is actually really good. Nice and straightforward, does damage to what's right in front of you. I think what's funny is that they're not instant, despite that you can't see them while they're flying. They actually have a travel time. The projectile is just invisible or something. Next crystal is an easy reward from the mini-boss. And it's not actually Bomb Cutter that we need, it's Bomb Ice. And unfortunately this is the end of the stage, which means we have to go back through the entire stage again. This is the one time in the game that Kirby gave this expression when I picked up a card. And I don't know what it means because I'm pretty sure the cards don't repeat. So we're back with Bomb Ice, which is kind of an awkward ability to use. If you touch anything, you explode immediately, but you're pretty vulnerable in the meantime. And why yes, this did come out just a year after Phantom Menace. It's actually a really good ability. Not much use in the air, but it can hit everything in front and behind you, even when you just turn around. You need Stone Fire against this mini-boss to get the crystal, which is pretty easy as long as you cram yourself in the corner, and it's all available in the stage. I don't think I've ever actually gotten this sandwich before, and I was wondering if you could even fly high enough to get it. Turns out, easily. Waddle Dee's here to help us out again, the awful driver that he is. The crystal is pretty easy, you can even see it off the cliff, just jump for it. You see that exclamation point whenever you need to jump. And sometimes he tricks you because you don't actually have to jump, you're perfectly fine just going right off the edge. You can even land on top of the objects and just kind of slide off the other side of them. If you do hit one head-on, I don't remember if you take a point of damage or not, but it doesn't slow you down or miss you out on anything, you just flip over it. I want to say this is one of the first invincibilities in the game. There's a different music track in this one that I don't know how I feel about. It's a well-used invincibility, though, since there's a large stretch of enemies you can just run through. There's a lot of different setups with these rolling logs going up the hill, but each one is just a little bit different. Some of you making sure you actually have to deal with the enemy on the platform so you have a safe place to jump to so the log can go underneath you, and others where the log will go over the edge onto the very platform you thought you were safe on. Unlike pretty much every other Kirby game, it's kind of hard to tell when a stage is going to end. They just kind of end. There's no fancy door or anything. Sometimes you're even expecting the stage to keep going, and suddenly minigame. Even though the game itself is 2D, I enjoy what it uses of 3D, such as the cannons here in the background shooting at you. Another in a line of weird enemies that give abilities, this green fish gives bomb. If you get close enough to the fish, it explodes, like a puffer fish, I suppose the intention is. Hopping in the top of this mountain and falling down, you'll find the green and black rock on the side, which you need Bomb Cutter to open for our crystal. And we're gonna need rock for later. Mentioned before, these fish give cutter, so grab that. The explosion from this actually makes the mini-boss pretty easy, but it does also make you fall down the pit, unable to grab the shard. And we need Rock Cutter in the next room to use our animal friends' abilities, because they can all do all the things that they could do in the previous game. The birds being able to fly, the cat being able to triple jump, and most importantly right here, the hamster being able to climb walls. So I lied when I said they could all do their thing. Chew actually cannot grab onto ceilings, and the fish, even underwater, is completely useless. Can't even move. For being the water world, this is our first proper underwater level. Since the underwater controls are pretty good, this ends up being just kind of an enjoyable romp, if a bit slow. You can't really fight this current, so just make sure to start going up to the left of this, at the top of the room. And you're not actually in a lot of danger in the next room, but you do have to grab this pole and shimmy your way down to the bottom in order to get the shard. I like how when you hit an enemy with that shuriken, they kind of stop for a moment and question their life decisions, but it also uprights them, so enemies that are normally upside down get spun around. Easy mini-boss, the biggest threat is the current shoving you somewhere you don't want to be. Though it did take me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out how to leave the room. If you want to swim with the current, these rocks actually aren't much of a threat at all, but you do have to stay at the very bottom if you want to get the shard. I love the touch of the rocks all breaking apart on the right wall instead of just flying off screen or something. Aqua's back, apparently got tired enough of Kirby's crap that he left to an entirely different planet. But Kirby's here to cause him problems anyway. As long as you have an ability with some range, he's not a difficult boss. You'd think his second phase would be kind of hard, needing an ability to stay above him and dodging all of his attacks, but you can honestly just stay to his right down at the bottom, and he only does one thing ever that is a danger to you. I love the touch that Kirby actually throws the rock just before it gets swept away. And then we're brought to Neo Star. I guess the intention is that like it's a new star, so it's still early in its life cycle, hence prehistory. And this world is full of dense jungles, spiders, cavemen, and shockingly few dinosaurs. And it was here that I learned that the spiders explode when they fall on the ground. Be careful of the pitfalls in the ground, most of them contain spikes, though one near the end contained a shard that I walked right past. It took me halfway up this room to entertain the idea that it was even possible to grab onto these vines on the side, which made getting up it much easier. And at this point, I'm sure I'm missing something. So let's grab you, and you. These vines can be a little spooky sometimes. If you miss your jump and the one you're jumping towards flies far away from you, you're just kind of caught in the air for a minute hoping that it comes back. Another mini-boss made much easier by having a ranged attack. The vertical slice logs will fall when you step on them, but above that first one is our shard. I was almost hoping I'd get through the entire room without killing anything. First shard is to the left of the fall in the next level. Very easy to miss, but it's also right at the start of the level. Captain D is back again, and jump whenever you get the opportunity, because at one point the path splits, and your shard is going to be on the top path. I swear when that minecart hits something, that is a stock sound effect I'm recognizing. You need Rock Bomb for the third shard in this level, and that is not a combination in this stage. Which means you've got to play through almost this entire stage with a very awkward ability. And unfortunately, I hit the wrong button and threw out my ability. At first I wasn't sure why I got hit there, but you suck their helmets off first. So the dude underneath then starts charging at you. These crushers feel shockingly dangerous though. Like on every one of them you almost don't make it. So if you need an ability, heading back to 1-2 I mentioned before, every ability is in the first room or two of this stage. And as a side note, I love how wiggly the world map is. Instead of just rotating the planet straight, the camera spins and rotates. So Bomb Rock is a stick of dynamite you throw out that explodes and will hurt almost everything on screen, including you, unless you duck putting a hard hat on. Get caught a little off guard by that, and you take damage. So I'm just trying to avoid getting hit here, and this piece of crap hits me anyway, lose my ability, and I get to play through this stage a third time. As a side note, this room with all the waterfalls, as long as you just keep doing a bunch of low hops to avoid the water physics, you can just breeze right through the whole room. Was not expecting the dynamite to bounce off the wall, but it gets the job done. And then I played through the next room or two before I realized I could just pause out of it. Finally moving on to the next stage, where we're ditching dynamite for literally anything else. First ability you have access to is Stone Needle, which is actually needed for the first shard in the stage, as it's the only thing that can break through the stone to break the destructible block. I got stuck in a tight spot between them, but on the upside I did very much confuse that pterodactyl. Take note of what Adeline painted, because we have to replicate that in the next room, very similar to what we did back in Dreamland 3. Unfortunately, it can be a little bit confusing as to what exactly you should be destroying in order to make that shape. And I think in that regard, I probably got the hardest shape. There we go, that got it. And we just cut a weird bit out of the middle of the pizza just to bother everybody. I was thinking Stone Cutter and the Small Bird would let me get through this room pretty easily. Either these collapsing blocks don't refresh your jump, or you have to come to a complete stop to refresh your jump, but I was very suddenly in a lot of danger. Last shard is pretty well hidden down this crevice. Your only real hint is that small star above it. At least these mountains know who the boss is. I don't know what it is about this first room in the next level. I cannot get through here without taking a bunch of these rocks to the face. If you have an ability that can fly with some speed, you can probably skip these moving platforms entirely. Kirby moves so slow when he's flying, though, that you might as well just take him. DDD's here to help us out again, as he's the only one who can break these pillars. If you just tap the button, he'll smack it and crack it, and then you gotta hit it again. But if you hold the button down, he'll pull back and start twirling his hammer, and then you can take the whole pillar out in one swing. Make sure to break the top of one of these pillars, though, near the end of the room, because it has our next shard in it. And don't completely forget, like I did. This room with the magma following you has always been one of the more memorable ones to me. You're never in any terrible danger, though, as long as you're not slacking off. I don't think the lava even completely covers the door if you wait around in the room. And the lava's still following after you in the next room, though it's even less of a threat, to be honest. Don't forget the shard off on the left, and make your way up top. The lava, once again, doesn't even follow you all the way up. Go back and grab Ice Needle to get another shard that I totally didn't miss. Ice is probably one of the more rare abilities in the game, so if you're ever required to have it, it's pretty understandable you might not. That said, Ice Needle is actually a pretty good ability. You have almost immediate invincibility, and you freeze anything within a large area around you. You can't attack, unfortunately, and while it does block solid projectiles, it does not block energy projectiles, like, say, that little dragon breathing fire. I don't know why I like these tubes of lava so much. They're just tubes. So that's what you needed Snow Needle for. Be a little careful, as after you break it, there's lava underneath. And boss time! Usually I grab a rock electricity for this guy, but I'm sure Bomb Cutter can do the job just as well. Though they do unfortunately get stuck on the other blocks. Just dodge where they're coming from in the background. Those are the platforms that aren't going to be safe. When it does one at a time, if you get on one that he's already raised, it's not going to raise again. That's your safe spot. Despite that he's right in front of you, he is actually invincible until the second phase of the fight actually starts. And you do have to hit him in the face, like the top half of the model. You can't hit him in the waist. He only really has one attack in this phase, and after you get hit with it once, you've got a pretty good idea how not to get hit by it a second time. What is my life? Which brings us to Earth! Wait, but that means if Kirby is canon with reality, and Kirby is canon with Metroid, and Metroid is canon with Mario, and Mario is canon with Tetris, and Tetris is canon with Mato Monogatari, then do you think Jack Black and Kirby would get along? Look, don't think about it too hard, okay? Start of the ice level, we're actually seeing a number of bomb enemies. Again, one of the more uncommon enemy types so far. Ice as well. Fireworks is still pretty good, though. I dig the little classic Kirby hoop things coming out of the landscape all over the place, only now they're see-through and icy. Where does Waddle Dee keep finding these things for us to ride? You can, but I don't feel like you should be able to get on that first igloo, but you get on the second one for your first shard. First boss goes down easy, and you need anything with fire to take the shard from him. There's a shard under this water somewhere. I like these ice trees in the background, too. It's the little things this game does to make the worlds feel almost magical, instead of just someplace. I swear those worms are laughing at me after they hit you with a rock. Oh hey, Kiki's back! Alright, we need a sky level. Where do we put it? Ice World. I like how this game handles the aesthetics of the clouds, with the little 2D sprites hanging over the edge, and otherwise looking almost like tablecloths. Keep your eye peeled for the crystal shard down below this cloud. Make sure to satiate your bloodlust and get this shard. You are going to need Needle up ahead, so make sure to grab these guys, which you can from the right pretty easy. A lot of stuff jumps out of the clouds at you in this room, which makes it real easy to get hit. Now we also need Electric, so make sure it doesn't jump over Needle, because now we have to play the whole stage again. And then don't lose it over a pit. This factory's so colorful, I wonder what they make here. Don't forget your shard at the top of the conveyors. Are we sure this is a factory? This kind of looks like a daycare. No, unfortunately, you cannot cut this boss's thread. That would have been hilarious, though. So Adeline paints 3 fruits, and you have to go by the color of those fruits in the next room. Now, I have no idea what that third one is, but I'm going to take a wild guess that it's an orange, and I was right. It could have also been green, and I wouldn't have argued. Remember to play it safe. Clear your path first. Most of these bookcases you can pretty easily run under, but there's one at the end that you can see wobbling even from a distance that'll fall almost before you even get under it in the first place. Are we sure this is a factory and not an aquarium? Alright, I think we found the factory. Now, I mentioned the cannons can lead shots, and that is exactly what they do in this room. So don't just assume you're safe by running. Actually watch the bullets and dodge. If it's a bit much for you, they do give you these little blocks every now and then to hide behind. I think we found the actual factory this time. You're going to want to bring Rock Needle from outside the level for this first shard. Have to go into these hidey holes and use the drill to break the blocks. DDD's helping out again to break these doors away. You'll keep getting trapped in with these crushers, so you'll want to rush out the other side, but you are never in any real danger of getting crushed. I dig the little stars on the conveyor wheels, though. They're certainly doing some kind of science in this place. Birds and pigs. Is that Kiki's sister or something? You are going to want cutter electricity for later in this stage, both of which are fairly easy to get. At the time I was convinced that you could not suck these guys in to get electricity from them. I completely forgot that you can actually throw your ability star upwards. So I just played through the entire stage again with cutter electric. You need cutter electric to break the cage to get the shard. This crusher room can be kind of spooky, but just don't get too greedy and it's not bad. This last dip can eat it because it is not safe. These crushers aren't bad unless you're going for the shard, but at least we don't have to get it again. I always forget that it's actually robots pushing these crushers. This boss is probably one of my favorite bosses in the game, and actually requires you to kind of pay attention and play decent. Not terribly hard once you get it, though. In the first part, all you can do is hit the hand, so you just have to wait for him to try to smash you. Jump over him and onto the other side, or he'll hit you when he raises him up. The missiles aren't actually a threat, they're mostly there to give you ammunition. Keep your distance from his second phase, and he's also not much of a threat. I've always had trouble with this part, and I think the intention is you have to kind of bait him backwards and then run forward again. And by now we've made a loop around the galaxy, so we're heading back to where it all began. the now very corrupted Ripple Star. I really enjoy the parallels that Ripple Star has to Pop Star. It's 4 stages, just like Pop Star was, and Ripple Star 1 is the exact same as Pop Star 1 with a different coat of paint. Even the shards are in the same place. You'd think the mini-boss would be more dangerous, but he doesn't actually come to the far left of the screen. This bomb enemy is kind of frustrating, because the way he throws bombs makes it real hard to eat him. But we do need bomb. And it was at this exact moment that I learned that these guys give ice. Unfortunately, you need bomb needle, and I was not paying attention. You know, there's another bomb enemy right over here that's easier to get to than the one before. You know, I don't think we'd seen bomb needle yet. Hey, Kiki again! Now, Ripple Star 2, instead of being a mirror of Pop Star 2, is actually a mirror of DDD's castle. Though instead of walking in the front door, we've got to walk to the side and go in the well. Make sure to take electricity in with you so you can get your first shard. DDD's here to help again. I love Kirby's worried little hop. And we don't even have to play as DDD this time, he just clears the way and off we go. Look around for goodies underwater, the shard's pretty visible. Adeline gives you an invincibility to tear through all these blocks real easy, which is neat. You need Cutter in order to get the shard, though. Which, thankfully, you can go back into previous rooms, so you can go get Cutter, which was in a previous room. Though I got back and it occurred to me that I can't actually break blocks below myself with Cutter. Cutter Needle is also not going to help me with that problem. I was actually confused for a shocking amount of time before it occurred to me that I can kill the same enemy to get double Cutter. I think that's the only card I missed in this entire game. We're through the underground, we finally made it into the castle on Ripple Star proper for our final proper level. If you just want to play this for completion, it's relatively easy. Just room after room of regular enemies. And since it's all regular enemies, you can even fill up on whatever ability you want along the way. Have fun with it. Make sure to get Fire Needle by the 3rd room, though, which is genuinely not the best ability for this. Some abilities make this easier than others, and not me almost forgetting to avoid getting one of the shards over the course of the game. And we can see there's something very unpleasant at the top of that tower, and that's where we find Miracle Matter, the final boss of the regular game, and Miracle Matter is actually not at all an easy boss. It's not terribly hard, but it's probably the first time in the game you're actually expected to learn patterns and how to approach the different mechanics. The music's also kicking. Who gave Kirby music the right to go this hard? One thing that makes this fight so difficult is that he has a different pattern for every phase. Every boss up until now has had at best 2 different patterns you had to know. And if you could brute force your way through one of them, you didn't even really have to learn it, just deal with the second one. Miracle Matter has 7 phases, and he goes back and forth between all of them over the course of the entire fight, randomly. So just making it through one phase isn't gonna be enough. You're gonna have to deal with it eventually. And on top of that, you can't rely on all your fancy, powerful abilities up until now. You effectively have to fight Miracle Matter as base Kirby, because you're going to have to change between all of your abilities over the course of the fight. Though I do find it easier to just suck the objects in and spit them at Miracle Matter, instead of actually gaining the ability. But both will work. I feel like Ice is probably one of the hardest ones to get a hold on. And the thing to remember about Ice is that the orbiting shards that are in the foreground and background do not hurt you. So when his ring expands, you can stand in the middle of it. Otherwise, stay patient. It's a long fight, don't do anything risky. What did I just say? And finally, the vibes have overcome. The darkness is banished from the land, and all is well. Now, I would die for that Queen Fairy. Okay, hear me out. I can fix her. The end credits are absolutely lovely, because of all of this art that shows up that's drawn real sketchy, and sometimes you even have a hard time grasping what some of these things are. But each shot is just so charming and interesting. They tried to do something neat with every one of them. Oh, but who's that guy? Okay, so that's the ending if you didn't get all the shards. So we gotta go back and we gotta get that shard. And then you have to fight Miracle Matter again. And unlike in the prior ending, we see the darkness actually explode instead of just leaving, and find that there was even more darkness hiding in the Queen's butt. Which brings us to our final stage. It listed it as a level, but the same as Dreamland 3, it's actually just a stage. This is the core of what's left, so we're gonna go here and rid the world of dark matter once and for all. Actually, we're ridding the galaxy of dark matter once and for all. The world is already be ridden of dark matter. I think it's neat that on your way in, you actually get help from all of your friends. It's not much of a level. Mostly, it's a path to a boss. 0-2. The core of dark matter, and his relation to Zero, the final boss of Dreamland 3, isn't really known, but it's at least understood that it's the core of dark matter. And this boss holds a very special place in my heart. Playing this game as a child, this guy was spooky, and probably my first interaction with something a little more on the eldritch horror-y side. Especially coming from a Kirby game. Though at this point we know that that's just Kirby's bread and butter. All things said, the boss is actually fairly easy. As a kid, I didn't realize that it was 360-degree movement. So I assumed when he spat out the things out of his eye, you had to find a safe spot to hide in. Whereas instead, you can just spin around him and it's no challenge at all. Though if you do that, your shots don't hit his eye. So while you're moving to the side, just stop moving for a brief moment right before your shots hit him. Almost imperceptible, but it's enough for your shots to hit. That stuns him so you can hit the halo, which stuns him so you can hit the root underneath. Dodge the green goo, destroy the green root, and you've saved the galaxy. And this is the best ship, don't at me. The end credits, once again, are lovely. It's the same sketches that we saw before, only now they're colored in, with some additions on top of that. Some of them may be a little more animated or progress a little bit more. The eyes on all the creatures have opened. The queen has gotten ready. The bone has hit the one guy in the head, and we've seen the repercussions of that coming back to him. And that is Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards. An absolutely wonderful game. A little on the easy side, but I feel like you play this game when you just want to have a good time. I did collect a number of cards over the course of the game, and here we can see what they're used for. They actually give you some enemy info, showing off the enemy, their name, and what ability you get from them. And even though I got a card in pretty much every level, I still only have a percentage of the total cards in the game. Which, if you want to see all of, I'm pretty sure I collected all of them in the proper playthrough. Until next time, everyone.